Hello, my name is Christine Murray. I'm your host and director of this event, Festival of Place Social Impact. Over these 2 days, we've been sharing how you can make a positive social impact through your work with experts and professionals giving you the inspiration and knowledge you need to deliver impactful places. Our journalism is funded by these events, and your support makes a real difference to our ability to advocate and educate how to create more inclusive, and impactful places. We rely on our sponsors and organization members to keep these events inclusive and our journalism barrier free. So, thank you to LDA Design, who are proud supporters of this event. And thank you to our organization members for their continued support. All our sessions are recorded and available to stream live or playback via the schedule button on the top right. And a reminder that we'll be taking your questions as usual. You can put your questions in the Q&A tab, which is on the chat panel to the right of your screen. So please feel free to use the chat for your comments and the emoji button to share reactions. The speaker slides and other links can be found in the resources tab. Again, that's on that chat panel, and you can download the slides for your reference or to share with a colleague after the talk. So in this session, we turn our attention to impact measurement. It's right at the heart of robust social value and social impact. So it's been brought up across several of the sessions, the importance of taking a robust approach to quantify and gather evidence to prove the impact we are trying to make, and it's seen as essential to building trust with the community. So joining me to discuss the pitfalls and future direction of social impact measurement, please welcome Catherine Manning, Head of Impact Practice at Impact Reporting. Catherine is Program Director and the driving force behind the game-changing social valuation tool, MeasureUp. Her passion is improving social value processes. She has for over a decade of deep expertise and has worked tirelessly to understand how current practices are failing communities. She joined Impact Reporting from the leading industry body, the Institute of Social Value, formerly known as Social Value UK, where she remains a trustee. With a background in leading engagement and technical teams, Catherine brings experience to delivering projects, programs, training, and events across various sectors. She is recognized as a WISE 100 Star of the Future finalist in 2022 and is dedicated to raising the voices and values of underrepresented populations. At Impact Reporting, she supports clients through consultancy in impact management, procurement, project management, and valuation research. So please welcome Catherine to the stage. Hello.
Thank you for having me, Christine. I feel slightly embarrassed from my own introduction there.
Well, it was truthful, I imagine, so I don't think you need to feel embarrassed at
Yeah,
all.
yes, it
I
was
see your
all very
presentation
true.
has That's all very true. Well, good. I hope you, I really look forward to hearing your presentation. I mean, I feel like measurement is a really hot topic in this space. There's so many different metrics. So looking forward to you shining a light on that and our discussion after your talk.
Wonderful. Thank you very much, Christine. And yeah, it's a great pleasure to be here. I won't add anything more to who I am beyond that the way that I term myself is that I'm a general social value and impact management geek. So I'm here to talk about measurement and valuation and to look at some of the issues that we're facing with where practice is now and where what's happening, what are we doing collectively within the practice to be able to progress and get better in this space. So before we get into the detail of the issues and what we should do, what are we talking about? So what does social value actually mean? So there's still lots of different definitions out there. hopefully, or good for us, that a lot of those definitions are coming together and there's a convergence in our understanding of what this means. So the two that I will reference here, and that I suppose I use most in my practice, is number one, the UK government Green Book has defined social value slash public value as being about the impact on the well-being of the population. The other organisation I'll reference is Social Value International, who I'm on the board of trustees for, and they talk about social value as the worth or importance people place on changes or impacts to their well-being. Lots we could unpick in that. We could spend this entire session talking about different definitions and aspects of social value. The key thing I'll pull out is that it's about well-being and it's about changes to our well-being. So what's well-being? We could spend the entire session talking about that. From Measure Up's perspective, so Measure Up is this social and environmental valuation and measurement resource that I'm programme director for. We align the set of social and environmental activities and outcomes that we have values and measures for to the 10 dimensions of well-being that are outlined by the Office of National Statistics. So that might be things like things that change about where we live, so our homes, the quality of our neighbourhood, the things that we do like work or volunteering or sport, the quality of our health, both mental and physical, education and skills, the state of the economy, our own personal finances, and some things that are quite subjective to us. So the state of our relationships with people, people that we love, our family, our friends, our neighbours, and our own subjective well-being. So how do we feel about the quality of our life right now? So if social value is about well-being is about, or aspects of well-being is about the things that the quality of our life and how we're doing. What's our impact? So our impact, if we look at all of those changes in aspects of well-being as like a whole pie, our impact is the bit of that pie that's ours, or the bit of that pie that's down to our organisation. So we get this cherry slice of pie over here. That's our impact. So if we all agree social value is our impact on aspects of people, communities, and the nation's well-being, where are we going wrong with measurement and valuation? So I've outlined 5 different issues that we're facing. They sort of go in order from high level down to more granular, but please don't hold me to that. And they're transparency, the types of value, and the valuation methods that we're actually using, what are we valuing, and the quality of the measurement that's going into our value calculations. I'll walk through those one by one. So first of all, transparency. So starting on a positive, really good to see that more and more organisations are publishing reports about social value, impact, sustainability. But even in saying that, and we can see from these different reports that are on the screen, if we're going to publish information about our impact, what are we talking about here? Are we talking about impact like Igloo, or social value like the CIOB, or are we embedding our impact information into our sustainability report or our annual report like BAM? Or do we need to separate out certain issues about impact or sustainability and publish those separately, like Weights have done? And then when we get down into what's being published inside, what quality or what level of detail are we expecting when we dig down into these reports? There's a lot of difference in there. None of this is wrong in the state that we're in right now, but there is a lot of variation. And what is it that's guiding us to be able to progress with being able to compare and contrast between the different impact data that's being published? If we dig down inside of the reports, let's say we look at social value, it seems reasonable that within a social value report, there will be some publication of something that indicates value. So quite often within the UK, that could translate into a figure with a pound sign on it. So in these two examples, we've got for every £1 invested, there's a £2.84 worth of social value generated, or in the other example, £86 million worth of social value generated through, I think it's 70 projects in that particular report. Now, what do those things actually mean? Now, this little, I'm not trying to pick on any of these organisations here. There is a lot more detail in the reports, but for us as readers of this sort of data, how are we supposed to tell what that relates to? Whether, is 86 million good? Is that better than last year? How does it compare to the sector as a whole? Similarly for £2.84. Is that good? Is it bad? Does it gone up? Has it gone down? What does it relate to? And what kind of value are we talking about here? And coming back to that point of what social value actually is supposed to be about, should we assume that each of these figures only relates to well-being value? But well-being value for who? Which stakeholder groups are we talking about? So there's a lot of questions that aren't necessarily clear when we see the different figures that are published at this point in time. So underneath those different types of value, there's different valuation methods that are being used. So I've got three here on the screen that are fairly common now, particularly I was thinking about from the built environment or placemaking perspective. There's Loop have a national social value standard. There's the Hacked Social Value Bank, and Social Value Portal have the set of national TOMs. Now, that can be useful because there's a set there for an organisation to be able to use. So could bring a bit of reassurance to say, right, these have been researched, they've been grouped together, that means there's some confidence in them. However, quite a lot of this practice is being done behind closed doors. There's certain amounts of methodology that's published, but it's quite often just examples rather than the detail that sits behind each value. There isn't necessarily always the clarity of us knowing within these different value sets, is it the same types of value that's being represented for each of the different issues or themes and outcomes or impact areas that are being represented here? Or are we talking about local economic spend versus cost savings to the state versus well-being value to the person or economic value to the company or to the economy as a whole? It's not very clear. And then there's the question then of what are we actually valuing? So some people might be familiar with the purple arrow diagram that's in the middle here. This is a basic impact pathway. It's essentially mapping out the movement from cause to effect. So the blue arrow at the bottom there, the stuff that we do, and then the stuff that happens because of the activities that we're doing. At this point in time, right, we're good at identifying socially and environmentally important things that we could do that could have a good could have a positive impact. So we're quite good at counting the things. Activity has happened. We're pretty good at counting the stuff that's gone into the activity, amount of money, amount of resource. So doing all right at counting the outputs, number of people that turned up to the thing, the training session, the volunteering, the community group. And then we value that. So essentially, we're valuing the cause of potential impact rather than taking those next steps along this causal pathway or impact pathway to understand the outcomes. What are the things that are changing for people and planet because of this activity that we've put into place? And what how much of that change is actually down to us? How much is that impact? At the moment, quite often there's question marks, and yet there's a lot of valuation that's going on that values that cause at the bottom there on the left hand side. And then there's the quality of the measurement that goes into defining what we've done or stating what we've done, or then actually calculating value. Not picking on this particular report, it's very unfair of me to have just taken one snapshot. Some really interesting figures here. So, you could be looking at learning and development figures, number of people, of learning attendees, satisfaction score, number of members, number of member contacts and opportunities. But we don't quite know with that, is that the right things that we're measuring? What's gone into us defining that those are the right things to measure? And from a social value perspective, if we're talking about well-being change for people and planet, has this measurement actually included the people who are most affected? So it's represented by this little cheeky chappy on the left-hand side of the screen who's poking out from behind that post. Okay, so if these are the issues, what do we actually do about it? Lots of things that we could just say, oh God, it's all too hard, so let's just chuck it over our shoulders and carry on measuring the stuff that we're already really good at measuring. So productivity and the finances. Well, we could do that. Or we could look at some of the solutions, the imperfect solutions that are in place, that are available now and that people are working on to try to address some of these issues with where we're at with practice now. I think this all has to be seen within the context that this is emerging practice. This is an emerging field. We're all learning about how do we actually methodically and transparently understand and report on our impact on people and planet. So my 5 imperfect solutions to our 5 challenges, I'll walk through these now. So number 1, to address our transparency issue, use practice standards. There's increasing numbers of practice standards that are out there. 2 that I would really highlight, and I've dropped them into the resources of this session, are the social value principles. Principle 6 is be transparent, and there's a whole new set of standards that's out for consultation for the social value principles at the moment, and I'd strongly encourage everyone to have a look at that. At the back of that document, there is a list of what should you expect to see within an internal impact report and what should you expect to see in an externally published impact report. Really useful guidance, a really useful checklist to walk through. The other one I'll point out is the SDG impact standards for enterprises, and you'll see the bottom pink factor, or I can't remember the exact name that they use, but there's basically 4 different elements to these standards. The bottom pink one there is transparency. So there's guidance within these standards that says, if we're going to be more transparent, how do we do that? And these standards will really help us all to be able to do that. I will say on this, both of those, Principle 6 and the transparency element, they sit within a broader set of factors for the standards and a broader set of principles. So all of our impact measurement and valuation should sit within broader impact management practice. On the valuation issue, what type of value are we reporting? What does that big £86 million worth of social value relate to? It's useful for us to think about value to whom. Who are we talking about representing the value under our social value figures? And it's okay to start questioning that with the figures as they come out as well. Say, right, within our social value figure, are we including economic value? So is that to the company? Is it to the whole economy? Are we talking about fiscal value, value to the state? Are we talking about well-being value to particularly affected stakeholder groups? Are we talking about environmental value to the environment? That one's probably the most obvious one, isn't it? But that, that it's really useful for us to think about that and to start critiquing what we're including and what we're not, because just putting the pound sign on the front can give the impression that everything's talking about the same thing when actually these figures are representing different types of value. And our valuation methods or value sources, I'd really encourage people to look at different using open valuation sources. And I'm really pleased to see an increasing movement towards publicly publishing valuation factors and methodologies so that we can all see more clearly what are people doing, what are the different well-being valuation methodologies, apologize, tripping over my words, what are the different environmental valuation methods, what are people using, what are people not, what's the assumptions that's gone into this value factor that we then might all be using. You know, one apprenticeship for this amount of time equals this amount of monetized value. What's included in that and what's not? And this movement is helping us to be able to be more transparent and all to learn a bit more about the different valuation sources that are out there, and then what we can include in our own practice. So, I mean, I work on Measure Up as one of these resources, but there's great other ones out there. So the Greater Manchester Unit Cost Database, there's an Open Social Value Bank in Denmark, the Global Value Exchange, Impact Valuation Hub. This is only some, actually. There's been a few more since I made this diagram. And if anybody has any that they know of, you know, share in the chat, share with one another and share back with us, because, you know, I'll be able to update our resources to help to point people to these open value sets as well. And then what are we valuing? Let's move from valuing the cause to valuing the effect or the outcome or our impact. So we could start to understand, well, what outcomes do we think people and planet are achieving, or you know, and that could be positive and negative, intended or unintended. What do we think is happening for people and planet because of the activities that we're doing? We could even ask people, because I've run this training program for all these last few years, what's actually happened for you, or what's been beneficial for you, or gain some skills, increase my confidence, increase my professional network. Brilliant. You might have just thought qualification to track some other things we could get from the people who are most affected. So, and then we could look at, well, how much of that change is actually down to us, and we could create our value estimate based on outcomes and impact rather than on the cause, our inputs, our activity, and our outputs. And then the quality of the measurement. Be progressive. We might be at a point in time where, proportionate to our resources, the capacity within the team, our understanding of impact measurement, management and valuation, the best thing that we can do is just identify the activities that we're doing and count whether the activities happened and the number of people that have turned up. Right, that's absolutely fine at this point in time. Look at it as a continuous improvement cycle and say, right, that's good enough at this point in time based on the resources that we've got available and the decision that we're trying to make off the back of this. All we want to know is that this activity is running, some people have turned up, that's good enough for us to try again next quarter or next year. But perhaps next year you want to know, well, this group of people keep on turning up, but there's another group of people who don't. So you might want to know some more details about people. Finally, you might want to actually talk to some people. You might want to be engaged with stakeholders and listen to them about what their experience has been and use that to be able to inform our measurement of our impact, and the valuation of our impact. I'm representing on the screen here some levels of measurement that are defined through our Measure Up resource. But the other thing to point out is this is talking about at that gold level, the principle one of the social value principles involve stakeholders, whereas one of the founders of Measure Up would say, if we're claiming we're creating value in people's lives, we should at least have the courtesy to ask if we have. I think that seems fairly reasonable to me. So that's my 5 issues and 5 solutions for us in the measurement and valuation space. But where to next, right? If we think this is continuous improvement in our measurement and valuation, I won't try to speak for all of you, but just to outline where we're going with Measure Up. We are continuing to grow the value set, and we're looking to continue to expand that outwards, so increase the breadth, but we're also looking at increasing the depth of those values. So how do we continue to understand the different experience of different stakeholder groups? And how could we use that to adjust our measurement and valuation? We're also looking to support people with using and adopting the Measure Up values. So, for example, we've got a local authority working group working on experimentation with this value set and measurement approach within their context, as well as some other experiments with social enterprises and charities. Finally, we're working with a number of people who are looking at perhaps there's something that's missing within lots of sets of values and metrics that are out there now, that therefore they don't meet the needs of your particular context. So we're working with some organisations who want to sponsor a value. So we'll work together to go a bit deeper in a specialist area, and that will be fed back into the wider community through being published on this publicly available resource. So my final point is just to be a bit more specific, um, and just to highlight with you some of the values that or some areas of research that we're working on. So firstly, we've got a few environmental values in the Measure Up set at this point in time. So like waste diversion, reduction in greenhouse gases, and some values around business travel. It's quite limited, and we recognise that. So we've been reviewing that and reviewing the guidance and looking to expand that value set so there's more coverage of things that you might want to measure in relation to greenhouse gases, a whole wider selection around waste management, some values around habitat conservation, and around pollution control. We're also looking at the ways that people and organisations can measure and track and value impact across supply chains. So particularly at this point in time, we're looking at supply chain spend. So with local SMEs and VCSEs first off, but then we're looking to expand how do we track impact and value along supply chains. And then finally, we're looking at what local needs analysis or local impact analysis. So what difference does place make to the impact that individuals experience? So I know I've gone completely over time there, so I'm going to stop and give us a chance to be able to have a conversation.
Thank you so much. It was really useful. I mean, I feel like as a reader for what's happening, as an overview of the metrics, and kind of touching on a concern that I think is shared across the industry. Like, is this true? Am I being honest when I kind of report this figure? And how, and if I feel confident in my contribution, my social impact, my social value measurement, uh, do the people I'm giving this information to feel like I'm telling that this is truthful, this is honest? And this word trust comes up again and again, and you've kind of added another T word to that, or that is key to that, which is transparency. So thank you to that. I think you talked about moving from cause to effect. And I wondered if you could dig into that a little bit. What when are we operating on cause? Cause is like we've just redone a public space and we're expecting that to have delivered it, or maybe delving in a bit between that shift from
Yeah.
cause to effect.
Yeah, I suppose I've sort of classified there's lots of different ways that terminology that people use, right? And in that those impact pathways, you can end up with loads of these different boxes, and it can be quite overwhelming to be like, oh God, I've got all these different data points to try and gather information about for my impact. And then we end up going back to the beginning and saying, well, what's the tangible thing here? Okay, we're running a social or environmental activity. So I'll try and choose one. So, waste management company working in a particular locality. There's a net zero waste, or not net zero, a zero waste target around the area. So they're putting on food waste projects in that area and say, right, we're going to work with local communities and we're going to teach them about food waste and how to reduce that. You could count number of activities that we've put on. You could count amount of funding that we've put into this program about food waste. You could count number of people that came to my food waste project over a year, and then we could all look at that and make an assumption that that's good. Food waste program happened, so obviously it's good. But people might have heard this before, but to any sort of impact person, you'd say to that, for each point along the pathway, you'd say, well, so what? So what happened? What's actually changed? So, you could take it a little bit step along there and say, people turned up to my food waste program and they learnt more about food waste. So what? They're more engaged in sustainability. So what? They went home and they've stopped wasting food. Or, there's been more. We put into place a recycling program, food waste recycling. And so the food waste that's gone into general waste has gone down by X amount. The food waste that's being recycled has gone up by this amount. You can start tracking some of these things that's actually the effect of that program. And it's not that any of those causes data points, they're not wrong, that they're just not telling us what the impact's been, but they are easier.
Hmm. Yeah.
But just because they're easier to measure and they feel a bit more tangible, we've got a more comfortableness with that. Number of people that turned up, I could count them, they were there. It feels more real. We're accepting that, but with the caveat that we're okay with there being no visibility of any of the actual impact. So the indicators, as you go down that pathway, they might feel more uncomfortable, but they're actually bringing a bit more visibility to the change that's happening because of what we're doing.
I've got a comment from Duncan Laird, who's head of urban at the National Trust. It is important to first answer the question, why are we measuring social impact, in order to inform how it is measured? This links to what you were just saying, but I wondered if you wanted to come back on that.
Yeah. It's such an important first step to ask, why are we doing this, before just going straight into measurement. And I've come along here today to talk about measurement, so we've gone deep dive straight into that. But the only point where we've kind of referenced that was the bit where I said about principle 6 being transparent, and the transparency element of those SDG practice standards, that those sit within broader practice. So there are 8 social value principles, the last one of which is be responsive, so do something with with your results. But the SDG impact practice standards, you'll see the blob in the middle is strategy. The line, the circle at the top, it's governance. So it's about being clear, why are we doing this, what are we trying to achieve, before going straight into, oh well, we've got all of these different things that we could or should be measuring around social or environmental impact. You need to And I suppose the other point that the question raises, it's about making this useful. We've all only got a limited amount of time and resource, and in general, organisations are trying to achieve their business or their organisational goals, right? We've got business strategies and why we're there already. So the impact measurement, valuation management, it's got to feed into helping the organisation to achieve what it's there to do. And that might
And
sometimes
there's that
come into
question that to conflict. Well, and I think that from a community and neighborhood point of view, I mean, part of it we talked about is about trust, but also, is this a good use of public money? Is this a good use of public process, or was this a good thing that we did? Did we deliver on what we have? And often I think that's the kind of starting point. But yesterday we heard from a number of investors who are seeking specifically to show that their funds are being invested in something that's going to create a positive environmental, social, or governance outcome. So in those cases, you've got an investor who is driving, who has kind of taken people's money, with the assurance that it's going to deliver some kind of impact, and they feel they need to report back to those funders. So I think then we've got this kind of, well, I'm measuring because the money wants me to measure, and then I think then you can get confused. So what am I measuring? What is it you want to know that we've delivered? And so it's coming from, I need to be measuring this, and not that initial question. So why am I measuring this, or what are we trying to achieve? There's a couple more questions here. Claire Richards, founder of Footwork, really helpful in demystifying this. We support community innovators in lots of very different places, but try to express commonalities of impact. Do you have some guiding principles to determine whose value?
Yeah, so my first port of call for the whose value, I'd start with the social value principles. So I think the key one I've linked into the resources is principle one, involve stakeholders. So a sort of first step towards understanding whose value would be to understand, well, who are your stakeholders? And from an impact perspective, that's just a slightly, I mean, these words all get bandied around in different ways, but we're thinking about who's the most impacted by the activity or set of activities that are under scope at this point in time. I mean, as a whole organisation, that would obviously be a different set of stakeholders. If you were going down to department level or a particular project, that might be a different set of stakeholders. But we're really thinking about who's most impacted by this activity, as well as who's impacting the activity. But we're not just looking at those that have got the most power and influence. We're looking at the most materially or most significantly impacted. There's another principle that is value the things that matter. From a social value principles perspective. And it's sort of right there in the definition of social value that I'd shared. We're looking at the value of the change in people's well-being or aspects of their well-being from their perspective. So how much is my reduction in loneliness, how valuable is that to me? How much is the improvement in your workplace quality, or your I think progression at work, how important is that to you, Christine? That our values of these different changes that we're experiencing will be different based on who we are and our personal context, and the social value principles guide us towards saying, well, if we're talking about changes in aspects of well-being to the most affected people or planet, then we should be looking at, well, what's the way that we could represent this change, this value, from the perspective of the people or stakeholder that's actually experiencing it.
But what I'm hearing is really specific to each context. Maybe coming out of the community engagement, we've identified that this community, really values connection and belonging. And so actually we're going to, choose to measure impact to that specifically, or really value that the most, instead of the other approach, which is we're going to count every tree, we're going to count every engagement process, and we're going to give that a financial value. So, I mean, it's those are two very different approaches. There's a question from Harriet Saddington, who is a journalist who works for us many times. So, hi, Harriet. How can local authorities improve public procurement processes to go beyond the generic and perhaps restrictive measures within, for example, national TOMs, to be more specific to a local area's needs for the long term, instead of teams for competing on pounds for a 10% mark?
Mm, yes, that's a challenging question indeed. So there's a few things that I would say. With the practice that we've got in place at this point in time, I do think we need to look at it as emerging practice still, right? So whether it's from a
Okay.
local authority perspective or suppliers to local authority or beyond, we need to have the space to be able to develop new approaches, and where there's gaps, whether it's with the national TOMs or whether it's with a different approach that people have got in place at a local authority level. If you've got enough information that says that there's something missing from that set of measures that you might have some allowance in there to be able to add in other things. With the local authority working group that we've got for Measure Up, we're looking at some practical examples of how different approaches could be complementary to the practice that's already in place. Because I suppose the other side of that is not to do a disservice to the practice that's grown pretty quickly over the last number of years with increasingly lower amounts of funding for local authorities to be able to embed this quite complicated new processes that perhaps there's been a misinterpretation of where the responsibility for this even sat. Should social value sit just within the procurement function, or should the Social Value Act have been brought in at the commissioning stage, right? Where we say, actually, to be able to maximise social value from public sector spend, we should be considering this at the point in time where we're defining what it is that we're going to do, but just putting that responsibility onto a procurement team who have to act upon a contract that's already been decided that it's going to go through. You've got limited options there, right? I do think within the approaches that we've got at the moment, there's been a recognised gap that there's good opportunities potentially for being able to use social value to be able to win work within public sector contracts from a private sector perspective. The way it's been defined as sort of additive to the core delivery of the contract, it's very, very challenging from a VCSE perspective, which is a real shame when it comes to delivering the sort of public and social services that would be at the heart of a charity or a social enterprise's delivery, but won't get recognised because it's not additional. So there's definitely space for that to be developed. I'm hopeful people have recognised that as an issue. Keep on talking about it. Keep on trying to put new approaches into place.
Thank you for your question. I think Cameron Smith, Impact and Feedback Coordinator at Hastings Commons in Hastings, is asking that, or is saying, I find that some of the most powerful impacts are not anticipated at the beginning of specific programs, and they're often unexpected. We try to capture these emergent impacts, but there isn't always an appetite for them. Would you say this is changing?
Ooh, I don't know if it's changing or not, but I'll say congratulations to you for recognizing unintended impacts. That's brilliant. There is a challenge, like with counting the things that we expect are going to happen. So, our planned impacts, I'll come back to the training or employment upskilling sort of example, where We say we're going to do this program. The outcome that we're looking for is improved skills, and so we'll count number of people that achieved the qualification at the end. Like you said, there may be, if you just talk to people, they say, yeah, it was great getting the qualification, I like my certificate. The thing that was amazing is that I met all of these people who are now a really supportive peer group. So we could, we could have changed that program and say, well, the most important thing is gaining the qualification, so we'll just move it online and people can do individual training. We've missed the whole value for the people themselves of saying, well, the thing that was amazing was meeting all these people and developing this professional network that will support me through the whole of my career. I'm being very egregious here, but yes, so is that changing? I hope so.
Not yet. But I
Keep
think that
doing it.
question is, does it count? Do you capture it? Can you retrospectively go back and set that as an ambition, or do you just make a note and try to capture that value as you see it arise because it's
I
learning for the next program?
Yeah, I think this is where it should be iterative. We should look at this as impact management practice, right? If we've got any other management practice within our organizations, we wouldn't expect to do everything exactly the same after we've been through a process of doing a bit, learning a bit, getting some insights. I mean, if we got that with our customers, we've got a load of customer feedback and it says, right, we love this bit, but this bit didn't really work for me. And I think my key priority and what I want from your product is X, Y, and Z, and you're doing A, B, and C, they're fine. Do you carry on just doing A, B, and C? Or would you respond to what the customers said? You'd respond to what the customers said and you'd change your process and you'd improve the data collection that helps you to be more responsive and more, efficient, more important to your clients, to your most important stakeholder group. So we should be doing the same when it comes to the people or the planet that we're impacting on. Uncover something unintended, review what you're doing and say, well, should we change our hypothesis a bit here and update what we're actually delivering to be able to achieve more impact?
Yeah, and I think that's where this this challenge in the built environment comes around, where every project is to a certain extent unique. So this
Mm,
knowledge share is really important across for someone starting on this journey. And in fact, Dr. Julia King, who's speaking next, mentioned to me about putting in a community engagement process that then was a paid opportunity, or created opportunities for the local people, and then actually helped someone back into work. And then you say, oh well, actually that's an incredible unexpected impact. The original concept was just community engagement, but then you could see someone taking that and saying, actually we're going to design our co-design community engagement process, and the impact we're going to measure is, does it help people back into work? And I think it's getting out of the I suppose sometimes the built environment industry can be held back by the uniqueness of each
mm,
project, meaning you start from scratch and then someone else starts from scratch on there, and there's that knowledge share across the industry is really really key. So
mm,
thank you, Cameron, for sharing that story. We have a question from Liz Earwalker, who is head of marketing and communications at Grimshaw. A lot of the challenge around social value is that we must consider existing social situations or the environment, not always think that we are, can, will be able to deliver value. Is there any measurement system or criteria that can help us look at things upfront?
Yeah, so yes, it is a really important point, right? Context does matter. There's two things I suppose I'm looking into this, and I suppose it speaks to that earlier question, is linked to the why are we doing it at this point in time? It's like, well, what we're working in here, and
Hmm.
therefore what can we do that's actually possible to be able to have an impact, and where are people at right now? So um one useful resource, right? I know it can feel slightly challenging to be able to translate this into individual or organizational level, is the sustainable development goals. So where are we, if we're aiming to have a sustainable future, what are the goals that 193 countries within the world agreed upon that say we should be aiming for these. And there's some of those goals that are applicable no matter what we're doing. So climate action and gender equality and partnerships for the goals. So there's some things in there that you can automatically say, no matter what we do, we should be trying to do stuff to be able to contribute to achieving these goals, because it's only if all of us work on them that we'll actually get there. The other thing is, I suppose, the much more granular level that we've been looking at is local needs analysis. And I've been not an expert in this area, but it is a really important part of trying to understand, well, where are we at right now? Like, could we say we're going to do a program within our development that's about getting young people into work? So we're going to work with young people not in education, employment or training, and that's where we're going to focus for the next 3 years. And then you look at the demographic data of the area, and it's primarily retirees. It's not going to go down well, could link in really nicely to national priorities, recognised as a really important area, not particularly relevant for this development area in wherever it is, the retirement village of, I'll say, North Yorkshire, because I'm up at that end of the world. It's a bit of a silly example because we probably wouldn't do that, but that
But
is the
it
sort of
happens, and
thing
I
where,
I've heard that. I've heard it before. I've heard it before where people say, we thought we do training and skills, but then we looked at the
mm,
demographic and they don't need any training or skills. So I think it's
yeah.
really important.
I will
Alexandra
say
Notte made a
just
point. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Oh,
Yes.
sorry, I was just going to say, like, this is one of the risks with whether it's the measure up resource that we've got, or any of the other sets of metrics, or say these are the things that you should measure if you're going to do social value. It's really the wrong starting point. They can be useful as a reference to look at, but it's really important to look at, well, what's the actual needs and
Mm,
opportunities? What's the issues that are around here? But where's things going really well that we could contribute to as well and support our
mm.
local communities, and start there. And then you can look at these lists and say, oh yeah, okay, there's data or there's resources that can back us up and can help us to measure and value. But the starting point should be what's going on in society and the environment in this place and what's actually needed.
I'm always a backer of a place-based approach, so I'm glad to hear that. We've actually reached the end of our time. We're actually just a couple minutes over. So I'm going to have to wrap this session. But thank you so much, Catherine. Such a useful reader. So many resources there. For those of you who would like the slides, they're available in the resources section. There were lots of great resources listed in them. So I know you'll want to download those and to share them with your colleagues. So thank you very much, Catherine. We will be back on the hour with Dr. Julia King, who is director and founder of Social Place, who'll be discussing listening to young people and hearing marginalized voices. We're digging into meaningful community engagement and how that process can deliver social impact. So join us on the hour. And thanks very much.